Hey, how's it going everybody? Chan126 here, back with another video, and today I'm here to showcase 10 consecutive matches of Great League Retro Cup featuring Zangoose lead. Zangoose is a lot of fun. Despite it being a flimsy piece of paper, it can put in a lot of work. It can hit like a truck, and if you're really lucky to get those boosts, it can come online really quickly. Unfortunately, we don't see Zangoose too often in Great League or Ultra League due to the simple fact that there's so many Pokemon available in those leagues that it can seem more of a liability to use Zangoose rather than use it for practical reasons. It has a lot more bad matchups than good matchups, so unless you're able to outplay your opponent or just, get very favorable alignment, it doesn't have many opportunity to shine. That being said, that's not the same for Retro Cup. There are restrictions in place, a lot of Pokemon are banned, and you know what, this meta is actually favored to Zangoose to a certain extent. So the team I'm using today is Zangoose lead, Froslass, and Talonflame, and hopefully this video is able to change your perspective on Zangoose, or maybe even inspire you to play it yourself. So let's get into my matches. So my Zangoose lead runs into a Vigoroth, first match of the day, and you know what? Not something I want to see right away, so I gotta swap out immediately. I bring in my Talonflame, and my opponent decides to respond with a Hypno of their own. And definitely not the worst matchup, but definitely not the greatest matchup either. But I have to play this matchup really conservatively. In this situation, I think my best chance of winning this match is trying to win lead, and that's exactly what I'm going to try to do. So I'm willing to go down 2 shields if that means I can win swap advantage. I gotta play this out really conservatively, so I'm just going to go straight Flame Charge. I could go Brave Bird, but if they shield that, they can just confusion me down, and I won't even get to another move. Extremely risky. So I'm just going to play it safe and just go straight Flame Charge, and hopefully I can get a few Incinerates in between charge moves. But we'll see how it plays out. So they took the first Flame Charge, I expect them to shield this one, and my opponent decides to shield it as expected. So we're in even shields, but my opponent's going to throw another charge move indefinitely. So because the Incinerate went through, as long as I, shield and preserve my Talonflame, the damage will register. So that means they take the damage from the last Incinerate, and one more should do the trick, and I'm able to farm down the Hypno, meaning I win swap advantage. So that's really good for me, and I'm loaded on energy. So they come back in with Vigoroth, and since I'm, double buffed, I just go straight Brave Bird here. That also works to my advantage because I debuff myself in the process, and that means less farm for the Vigoroth. So now my Froslass pairs with the Vigoroth, and I'm going to bring in Froslass. So unfortunately, my opponent decides to swap out a little preemptively, and you know what? Shadow Ball, more like Shadow Realm, because that's exactly where I'm going to send their opposing Froslass. And there's really nothing they can do, they don't have any shields, so this is just going to delete them off the map. And now they have nothing to, deal with my Froslass besides this Vigoroth, and we all know Bulldoze is such a trash move, it might as well heal my Froslass at this point. It doesn't threaten me by any means, and at this point, there's nothing my opponent can do, they're out of energy. I'm going to throw an Avalanche, and this should probably KO. And as you can see, swap advantage severely determined the outcome of the game, so, it's great that I won it, and honestly, if I didn't, then chances are I probably would have lost that game, pretty easily. So GG's to my opponent, and that's game 1. On to the next match against 9-Ball 777. Zangoose lead into Froslass. This is a favorable matchup for me, but it's not too terrible for the Froslass. At the very least, if they stay in, they can get a shield if they want to, so really up to how they want to play it out. So as you can see, a lot of lag. The fast moves kind of stuttered and they all caught up at once, but it plays out more or less the same. Even if I throw a Night Slash, it won't KO from this range, so no matter what, they get a charge move off. I shield because, it would delete my Zangoose if I let it go. And my opponent decides to bring in Medicham, I swap into my Talonflame. And here, very tricky situation. I'm down to shield, and, Medicham isn't too terrible against Talonflame with an energy lead and shield advantage. So in my case, I just decide to go for it. I risk it for the biscuit, and I'm going to go for the Brave Bird. Obviously, I could go Flame Charge to play safe, but, if I'm lucky, they don't shield and they let it go. But we'll see how it plays out. Unfortunately for me, they do decide to shield, and that means I won't get to another charge move because I'm double debuffed because of the Brave Bird. And I'm just waiting out the timer, but I'm going to bring in Froslass indefinitely. I bring in Froslass, and we've already established that this Medicham has Psychic, so at this point I'm going to shield it just to play it safe. I don't know what they have in the back besides their, their own Pokemon, which is their Froslass. So they bring in their Froslass to mirror mine, but fortunately for me, I didn't use my energy on my Zangoose, so I'm just going to throw the Night Slash immediately. And fortunately for me, I'm able to get the boost and farm down that Froslass, and that's really good for me. So my opponent decides to come back in with Medicham, and because I'm boosted and this Night Slash is going to do a lot of damage if they don't shield, so it's really up to them to decide what they want to do. My opponent shields, and as you can see, I got another boost. So look at these Shadow Claws adding up to the damage. This Medicham is taking super effective damage, so they got really scared. They didn't think they'd be able to farm me down at that rate, and I don't blame them. So the Medicham is out of energy, and at that point, I just, farm it down with Powder Snows. And my opponent's last Pokemon is a Magcargo, which is definitely not a great matchup for me. However, it's a no-shield scenario, and I'm almost at 100 energy, so there's really nothing for this Magcargo to do. It's going to eat 2 Shadow Balls, and it's going to KO without a doubt. Here comes the second Shadow Ball, and we already know it's going to KO, and that's a GG to my opponent. Unfortunately for them, they got really unlucky. I got 2 boosts, and obviously, it sucks to be on the receiving end on that, but you just love it when it happens to you. So on to the third match. My opponent is Keicho1924. Zangoose into a Driploom, and that's a very favorable matchup for myself, so I expect my opponent to swap out, and they bring in a Vigoroth. So something that's worth noting, and which is pretty important, is that there's a lot of normal types roaming around in Retro Cup. There's Munchlax, there's Snorlax, there's Lickitung, so even though I'm eyeing the top right corner for the typing icon, I don't swap out immediately unless I can see the sprite. It's very important not to, instinctively swap, otherwise it can cost you. So I farm up to a close combat, and I throw the Night Slash just to be a little conservative on energy. And then I bring in my Froslass into this Vigoroth. The Vigoroth doesn't really threaten my Froslass, even if they manage to line up Bulldoze. So at this point, I'm in a really good spot. I get the Avalanche off, and I'm expecting a Bulldoze from my opponent. However, it doesn't KO my Froslass, so I don't need to shield it if I don't want to. So I just proceed to farm down the opposing Vigoroth. And my opponent, I did not see what their Pokemon was, but I did see the Water and Rock type icon. And it's a Shadow Omastar, so that's pretty spicy, not something you see too often. Unfortunately, my opponent probably thought I was going to get to another move, so they didn't want to risk it. And you know what? If they tried to farm me down, I definitely would have got at least an Avalanche, so they made the right call to an extent. However, they're down a shield, and I'm up a shield. So I'm going to shield this because I don't want my Talonflame pairing with the Omastar. I just need to be very, careful that they don't catch a move. And because they were in the middle of the Mudshot animation, I'm just going to throw the close combat. This is going to one-shot the Omastar, and then at this point, I can just swap out if I really don't want to. However, because they can't hex me down, I'm just going to throw the Night Slash. And I'm just going to play it safe and just secure the win from here. There's really nothing for the Driploom to do. They don't have enough energy, and even if they did have, a Shadow Ball or an Icy Wind, it does not KO with Talonflame at full HP. So my opponent is basically stalling out a bit. I mean, they want to play it out, that's perfectly fine. But unfortunately for them, there's really no play for them. And as you can see, I think they realized it on their end, and they didn't want to waste time. So they decide to quit, and, that's a GG. So on to the next match against Yumasakin TV. My Zangoose lead into an Altaria. In this situation, very unfavorable matchup unless I get boost. But in this situation, I always safe swap the Talonflame with the intent of sacking it and just going straight Brave Bird. However, my opponent makes a very curious decision as to, bring in a Hypno instead of staying with Altaria. Maybe they just didn't want this Hypno to pair with the Zangoose. However, I played this out, this situation out before earlier on in the video. And if I play conservatively and I play it out right, I can definitely win this matchup. So my intent here is try to win swap because I don't want this Zangoose pairing with Altaria again. So I'm going to throw another Flame Charge, and at some point I do expect them to shield. And they don't, which is actually really surprising. So as long as I shield here, that guarantees I win swap. And I'm going to do it. I'm definitely going to take that, so my Froslass pairs with the Altaria instead. I'm just going to proceed to farm down, and that means, you know, I have a move ready for whatever comes in, and then the Hypno also chipped me down even further, so they're not going to get much farm out of this Talonflame. I'm just going to go straight Brave Bird. There's no reason to go Flame Charge at this situation. I'm not going to get to another move. And my opponent decides to let it go. And as you can see, they take the Brave Bird and they swap to Metasham. So in this situation, I need to bring in my Froslass just because, you know, if I bring in my Zangoose, they just farm me down, which is not ideal. They still have a shield, so I was expecting them to shield regardless. I didn't even go up to the Shadow Ball, but curiously enough, they decide not to shield. And actually, this does cost them, you know, later on in the match. As you can see, they throw Psychic, and that pretty much one-shots my Zangoose. I was able to get, you know, an extra Shadow Claw through. So my opponent is able to get one more charge move off, and as you can see, it's a Psychic, so it does a lot of damage, and at this point, it's going to come down to the wire. And my Froslass is able to Powder Snow down the Altaria, and you know what? Super close game, but fortunately, I'm able to come out on top. And on to the last match of this set against Benjamin Valdo. So my Zangoose lead into an Abomasnow. Fairly neutral matchup for the most part. Both Pokemon are fairly glassy, however, I can't afford to take a Weather Ball, so I just have to play it out to the best of my ability. I'm going to go for Night Slash first. Because I did go up to a close combat, my opponent has to call it or not. And I get the first shield, which is perfectly fine. So they're able to get my first shield, which is perfectly fine. I'm going to throw the close combat here. And unfortunately for my opponent, they do not shield. So I want to preserve my Zangoose here, so I'm immediately going to swap out into Talonflame. They have a Wish Cache, which is perfectly fine, because I know at the end of the day, no matter what, they have to throw a Blizzard to KO me. Even if I Brave Bird here, a Mud Bomb with a defense drop is not enough to threaten my Talonflame, so they're put in a very peculiar situation. Not only that, they don't even shield the Brave Bird, so they must be really confident in what they have in the back for them to make such a play. They throw the Brave Bird, and that's perfectly fine. It was expected. So now they're energy dry, and just like us, we're just waiting at the timer, and you know what? I'm going to bring in Froslass. I feel like Froslass with an energy advantage is a lot more valuable than, Zangoose. Unfortunately, they're going to be able to get one last Mud Bomb off, but, Froslass is pretty sturdy, so for the most part, it can take it. So I'm going to throw a Shadow Ball here. I expect my opponent to shield. And at this point, I'm getting a little nervous here. I'll be completely honest. I lost track of their count during this match, so I'm playing it super scared. I have to shield because, no matter what, I can't afford to let my Froslass go down. And I'm thinking, you know what? They probably had more energy than they did, and that's what I was thinking. Unfortunately, you know what? That almost cost me the game, because I decided to swap out to Zangoose thinking I can catch a move, but, in reality, that just gives them more farm, and it's just coming down to the wire. Unfortunately, I was able to, throw the Shadow Ball before they're able to even consider swapping, and yeah, that's going to KO the opposing Froslass. Their Wishcash is still alive. Unfortunately for them, they don't have any energy. So this is going to be a wrap, and that's the end to the, first set of the video. And I was able to win it 5-0. So nice little clean victory for the most part. So I get a Pupitar for my troubles, and as you can see, you're going to see some pro throw-balling skills right here. Oh, nice miss. Oh, missed again. Third time's a charm? Excellent, no problem. That was all planned, guys. As you can see, I was at 30-60, and I jumped up to 31-29 after that, 5-0. So pretty good for the most part. And off to the next set, which was my last set of the day for this account. So Zangoose against we're about to see. Against a Jellicent, so very favorable lead for myself. My opponent decides to bring in a fighter, which is a Primeape. And honestly, in my last few, couple of sets, I've been starting to see Primeape a lot more frequently. Personally, I don't think it's bad or good, but it's definitely becoming a lot more frequent in my matches. So in this situation, I'm just going to go straight Flame Charge. I feel like going Brave Bird and they shield would just instantly lose me the matchup, and I can't afford to let that happen. So I decided to let it go. My opposing Night Slash, the opposing Primeape didn't get a boost on their Night Slash, so I know I survived that second one. My opponent comes back in with Jellicent. Unfortunately, I'm not going to get to a Brave Bird, so I'm just going to go Flame Charge just to use the energy that I had. It's better to use it than not use it at all. Get some chip damage off. And they're going to Hex down my Talonflame. As you can see, it's Jellicent Double Fighter. So in this situation, I'm just going to get some chip damage off or get a shield at the very least. And they took the Night Slash, and even though it's resisted, as you can see, it does a lot of damage to that Machamp. Unfortunately for them, that I was able to shield that Rock Slide, so it doesn't threaten me. And I proceed to farm down the Machamp. However, this Jellicent still has 2 shields and some energy, so I'm in a very awkward position. I feel like it's better to go Avalanche to be more energy efficient, and at this point, they can't really afford to take the risk at the fear of a Shadow Ball. So I get the Avalanche off, and you know what? I get another shield. So this is looking really good. And here, if I tried to go to the Shadow Ball, I probably would have got hit with a charge move. But either way, at this point, the game is pretty much over. There's really nothing for this Jellicent to do. They're going for their only win condition, was trying to Hex me down, which is the right idea. It's just that, unfortunately, they weren't able to execute it in time. It's a little too late, too little too late, and that's going to be a wrap. And GG's to my opponent. So far, Zangoose is doing pretty well. It's had some good leads, it has some unfavorable leads. For the most part, I've been able to make it work. Battle starting, so we did find somebody. And I'm facing C Money the God. Zangoose into B-Barrel. B-Barrel is actually somewhat of a, dark horse pick. It's something that not a lot of people caught on. It's something that can do well against, Froslass and, the Lick users. So that's really good because it is a normal typing. And of course, I go to the close combat, but instead I throw the Night Slash. I just want to be a little conservative with my energy, and hopefully, if I'm lucky, I get the boost. So as you can see, I did farm up to a close combat, but I'm just going to go straight Night Slash. Hopefully I get the boost, but if not, it's not a big deal. So I get one Night Slash off, and I'm going to get this other one off. So it's really up to them to decide what they want to do. And they decide to let their B-Barrel go, and I got the boost, which is really nice. So these Shadow Claws add up against the Froslass. As you can see, 2 Shadow Claws did that much damage. I bring in my Talonflame into the Froslass, and at this point, things are going from bad to worst for my opponent. They're going to throw an Avalanche. It doesn't KO. Unfortunately, you know what? Like, things are not looking too well for my opponent. They actually go for the Shadow Ball, which is actually surprising, but it makes sense considering they want the raw damage. I'm going to throw the Brave Bird here. Okay. So they shielded the Brave Bird, but at this point, that pretty much seals their fate. They don't have any shields for my Shadow Ball, and you know what? The Deoxys wouldn't even survive at that range. My opponent throws a Rock Slide, and honestly, I probably should have threw a bit earlier to prevent what's going to happen right now, which is, you know, they're going to throw a Psycho Boost. That being said, you know what? Like, they get the Psycho Boost off. I'm just trying to get as much energy as possible. Because they debuff themselves, the counters basically do nothing because they're resisted. So I'm going to get one Shadow Ball off, and, you know, a bit more energy, and I can throw another move. And at that point, it's GG. Their Froslass is off to the Shadow Realm, and there's nothing they can do. They activated my Shadow Ball trap card, and you know what? That's a GG. So that's another win under my belt, and you know what? We're doing surprisingly well for the most part. A few misplays here and there, but you know, that's the type of thing you need to keep an eye out for to improve your skills. So my next opponent is YGG Drace. Zangoose against the Deoxys. Not the worst matchup for Zangoose, definitely not great either. That being said, as you're going to see that my opponent actually misplays this matchup, and you're going to see why. So I'm going to throw a Night Slash immediately. And my opponent decides to shield, which is actually sometimes questionable on my part. I feel like there's no need to shield the Night Slash because the Deoxys can take it. And, you know what? It's only really worth it if I get the boost in the process, which I didn't. And the fact that I'm able to get the second Night Slash off before my opponent gets their Psycho Boost off, that's really critical. Because as you're going to see, I'm going to let this Night Slash, this Rock Slide go. And I'm just going to proceed to farm down with my Froslass. So at this point, you know what? Like, I'm going to shield just to be safe, preserve that HP, but at the very least, I'm ahead a lot of energy for when their second Pokemon comes in. And my opponent decides to bring in a Kingdra, which is actually pretty decent for the most part. I've seen it quite often in Great League. The only thing I don't like about it is its fragility. As you can see, a neutral Avalanche pretty much does like 3/4 of its HP. I'm gonna throw another Avalanche, and yeah, things are not looking too good for my opponent. I expect them to either let it go or shield. They decide to shield, so they really want to preserve this Kingdra. At the very least, get, you know, get my Froslass off the board. But at this point, you know what? My Froslass did its job. It's not going to get to another move, so yeah, I decided to save the shield for Talonflame and farm down the Kingdra, which is really good for me. And my opponent is waiting to switch clock, and they're going to bring in a normal type user, which is a Munchlax. And this is a very tricky situation. Munchlax is pretty bulky, and it can take, you know, at least one move. I don't want to risk going Brave Bird immediately because, like, it wouldn't KO the Munchlax. So I'm just playing it safe. I'm just ramping up, and unfortunately, I throw my move, and my opponent is able to catch. I even went one Incinerate over to try to throw off their count. Unfortunately, you know, that ends up being my downfall. But it's going to come down to who can get their charge moves off faster. So I need one more Incinerate before I can get to another Flame Charge. They essentially need 2 Body Slams, so they get a Body Slam off, and as you can see, you know what? It's super close. It comes down to a fast move showdown, and Incinerate is able to get me enough energy for a flame charge, and I'm gonna, you know, let it rip. And that's gonna KO the Munchlax. So GG's to my opponent. Extremely close game, and that's probably the closest game of, you know, both sets. Very, very close. On to the next match. My next opponent is Champion. Zangoose into Froslass. Have this matchup before. Favorable for Zangoose, but it's definitely playable on the Froslass's part. At the very least, if they plan on sacking the Froslass, they can take one shield. But my opponent decides to swap out into Politoed, maybe expecting a Night Slash, but you know, I saw the swap, so I'm just gonna close combat. I want to charge up a bit of energy, but I decided to bring in my Froslass. Definitely not the greatest matchup for Froslass, considering they resist the Powder Snows and the Avalanches, so I essentially have to go straight Shadow Ball. So I'm going to throw the Shadow Ball. My opponent does not shield it, and this is a very peculiar situation. So essentially, it would take 2 Weather Balls to KO my Froslass. I can take one more if I really wanted to. And you know what? I let this one go. I would need to shield to Powder Snow down this Politoed, but I personally don't think it's worth it. So I actually decide to let it go. I'm not going to shield this. And I decide to, you know what? Wait out the switch timer, save the shield, and come back in with Zangoose. And hopefully this energy advantage is enough to, you know, claim the victory. And they bring in a Venusaur, and at this point, the game is pretty much over. I'm loaded with charge move energy on my Zangoose, and I still have 2 shields, so at the worst case scenario, you know what, it could be close, but no matter what, I just saved 2 shields for Talonflame, and there's really nothing for my opponent to do. I'm just gonna go straight Night Slash, because obviously close combat is resisted, so... And as you can see, I got the boost again, and this Night Slash is definitely going to KO. Really not much else to say. Because I'm boosted, I decide to, you know, Shadow Claw the Froslass because they really do add up. And you know what? One more Incinerate's going to do the trick. Unfortunately, my opponent does realize they don't have any more play, so they decide to top left. GG's to my opponent, and yeah, very close games for the most part. And I believe this should be the final match against Hugh. Zangoose into Machamp. Obviously, I need to swap out immediately. Very bad lead. And I decide to bring in Talonflame. Unfortunately for me, this Machamp is going to outpace me, so they can throw a Rock Slide or a Cross Chop. I got a shield regardless because I can't afford to take the risk or lose all this energy. Unfortunately, my opponent baits me, which is not good, which also means they save on energy. So as you can see, a bit of lag there. I tapped my Flame Charge, but it kind of delayed a bit. But I don't think anything really impacted the matchup too much, so yeah, I'm going to go Flame Charge here. And then, it's super risky, but I decide to go for the Brave Bird here. Okay, got all the bubbles, and this Brave Bird does one-shot the Cresselia with the buff, so things are really looking up for me. These Incinerates are also chunking the Froslass, and I'm able to get to a move before they get their Avalanche off, unless they're planning on farming me down. So far, really well. So I decided, because I'm probably not going to get to a charge move in time, I decided to bring out my Zangoose and sack it. It really doesn't have much play against the Machamp, so there's really no point in keeping it unless I'm able to get a significant energy advantage. And here I do make a mistake. I definitely should have came in with Talonflame, but part of my thought process was, you know what? I actually lost track of their switch clock. So I'm thinking if I bring in Talonflame, the Machamp is just gonna punch me down, and I really didn't want that. Unfortunately, my options were extremely limited, and because I have no shields, this Rock Slide is going to one-shot my Froslass when they eventually get to it. And naturally, they shield, otherwise it would KO. And unfortunately, they outpaced me, and there's really nothing much I can do in this situation. It would have been a close game, and what I should have done was bring in my Talonflame instead of Froslass. But like I said, I lost track of the switch timer, and, you know, there's no guarantee I would have won, even if I played it out that way. It definitely could have been closer, but by no means a guaranteed win. And unfortunately, I lose my very last match of the second set, so I end up going 9-1. You know, we're doing our Asian Milkman impersonation. I win 9 times out of 10. That loss was definitely intentional. So as you can see, you know, 4-1. Definitely could have been a 5-0 if I played it out perfectly, but, you know, mistakes happen and you just gotta learn from them. I get a Stunfisk for my reward, and, you know, not the worst thing ever, but yeah. So yeah, right now I'm probably just talking to Twitch chat, just saying, you know what, I kind of threw that game, I'm a paid actor, and they probably think I'm a paid actor, because, you know, it was close, but no cigar. And, you know what, considering I had a very bad lead, I had a Machamp lead into my Zangoose, I feel like I played that out okay for the most part. But yeah, it was definitely a winnable match. So I go from 3129 to 3172, climbing, you know, about 100 points, give or take, and yeah, that was a pretty solid 2 sets. And you know what? I had a lot of fun doing it, and that's the most important thing when it comes to these themed GBL Cups. You gotta, you know what, take advantage of them, play things you normally get to play on a daily basis, and just have fun with it. I've already established, you know, I don't really care for the leaderboard, so I don't mind just looking around in the low, you know, 3000s or, you know, 3100s. I like finding matches relatively quickly, and yeah, that's good enough for me. So thank you guys so much for tuning into my video. You know, hopefully I didn't bore you for this long, but you know, if you want to support me, you know, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. It's free, and you know what? I'll continue making videos for things that you want to see, or if you got a team that you want to see me play, then by all means feel free to drop a comment below. So thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next video. Adios.